The man in the arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt. Welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast. Here's your host, Jack Meligan.
Welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast. My name is Jack Meligan. I've spent over 30 years as a settlement planner, pre-mediation consultant, and financial advisor to plaintiff attorneys and personal injury victims across the United States. During that time, I've been lucky enough to acquire over 1,400 personal injury claimants. I've attended over 382 mediations on my own. And in that time, I've been able to come across and meet and work with some of the top trial lawyers in the country. And I've worked with a few that probably weren't so good, but it's enabled me to see the vast difference between really, really good trial lawyers and the ones that are not so good. And so the purpose of my podcast is to interview the best trial lawyers and settlement experts in the United States and uncover their true stories so that personal injury claimants, or soon to be personal injury claimants, and other personal injury attorneys can help decide on who to retain to work on their case or to associate in on a case. So my goal is to weed out the toxic waste, the scumbags, the pretenders, so that you all can avoid them and get right to the best of the best. And we want to connect you with the best in the business, the settlement pros, and help you avoid the settlement cons. Now, that's not to say that they're convicts. It's just that in this day and age of the internet and websites, we know that there are websites that can lead people to believe that an individual attorney is much more capable and better than they really are when it comes to personal injury law. So we want to be able to help you find those that are willing to step into the arena with nothing to hide, because the credit really belongs to those who are actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood. And when it comes to personal injury law, the arena is the courtroom. So the best settlement pros are those trial lawyers who are not afraid of the courtroom. In fact, if you talk to them, they'll be happy to tell you that they love to try cases. They look forward to it. It's what gives their life meaning. It's the juice that gets them up in the morning. And in some cases, they wish that a defendant would make their day by not making an offer on a case so they can take it to trial. They live for the courtroom, and those are really the best attorneys. And unfortunately, unless you happen to luck into being referred to one, you may not actually find one if you're looking for them. They don't advertise. So let's begin with today's session. And let's welcome Tom D'Amore. Tom is a trial lawyer in Lake Oswego, Oregon, in the Portland area, someone that I've known and worked with. Tom, welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Jack.
Hey, glad to have you. So, I want to tell you a little bit about Tom. He's the managing owner of D'Amore Law Group in Portland, Oregon. He's licensed to practice in Oregon, Washington, and California. He's got the West Coast covered. His practice emphasizes serious and catastrophic personal injury with an emphasis on trucking litigation, wrongful death, sexual abuse cases, product liability, and other complex litigation. Tom also represents several Oregon counties in the National opioid litigation. Tom is board certified as a civil trial specialist with the National Board of Trial Advocacy, and that same board has also certified him as a trucking litigation specialist. And that designation means that he is the only board certified trucking specialist within the state of Oregon, and one of only 36 board certified trucking specialists in the entire United States. Tom serves on the board of the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys, and he's consistently chosen as one of the top 50 attorneys in Oregon by super lawyers. He's also AV Preeminent rated for the highest ethical standards and professional ability by Martindale-Hubbell. And in 2019, we're going to want to talk about this, but Public Justice nominated Tom and his co-counsel Trial Lawyer of the Year finalists. We'll want to talk about that case. I want to hear about that, Tom. So,
okay.
Again, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. It's our inaugural issue, and we're recording this at the end of April in 2020. And of course, we've all been through the COVID-19 virus situation. Looks like, are you in your office today? I am in my office. We're considered essential, I think, as the bosses, even though our staffs are working remotely.
Yeah, exactly the same. I'm in the office, but all the other staff, for the most part, are working remotely.
Yeah, it's a different world out there, that's for sure. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen when this, when we get past the main part of this virus reaction, and what our lives and our businesses and practices look like going forward for the entire country. It's definitely going to have a long-term effect on all of us. So,
yeah, I think things are going to be different in a lot of ways. Some good things, but we are going to have to change for a while. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, let's talk about you. You and I have worked together over the years several times, and used to run into you in the gym in the morning, and then now here we are on a Zoom call. When did you start your firm, Tom, and how big is it today?
I started our firm back in 1992. We're about 5 attorneys now, 17 staff. I originally went to law school after practicing as a CPA for a couple of years. So when I originally got out of law school, pardon me?
How did you become a CPA?
Well,
pretty unusual.
I had always wanted to go to law school, but I, in addition to getting a political science degree, I also got a degree in accounting. And my accounting professors strongly encouraged going to work for a good CPA firm for a couple of years and see how you like it, and then maybe go to law school afterwards. So directly out of undergrad, I went to work for Arthur Andersen in San Francisco. Made some friends there that I've had for a lifetime. But after 2 years and a day, when I got certified as a CPA, I decided I want to go back to law school. And so then I got back on the law school track and started that fall.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So let's back up here a little bit. I want to get to some of your real backstory and what's in your DNA. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in southern Florida. That's where I spent probably until I was in the 9th grade. And so that was where I grew up and trained and got my background, I guess you should say, before my mom got divorced and moved us all out west.
So, and where did you move to when you moved out? California?
No, moved to southern Nevada. Lived in a small town called Mount Charleston up in the mountains. So it was a culture shock from southern Florida in the heat, never having seen snow before, to moving up up into the mountains of Mount Charleston, Nevada.
Wow. Wow. Why Mount Charleston? What made her go there with you guys?
My mom had a good friend that owned the lodge up there, and they brought her in to manage the lodge, and so that's how we got out that way.
Wow. So you got brothers and sisters?
Brothers and sisters. I had a brother. I got two sisters. One lives in Florida still, one in Las Vegas, and my older brother he's passed away a few years back.
Oh, sorry to hear that. So, we know what your mom did. What did your dad do for a living when you were growing up?
He was a heavy construction machine operator. So, the backhoes and those kinds of things, putting in mostly utility type stuff. That's what he spent most of his time doing.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow. So, so in the 9th grade, you moved to Nevada. You finished high school in Southern Nevada, and then you went to college. Where'd you go to college?
I went initially to Dixie College in St. George, Utah to play football. And then I went to University of Nevada, played there for a few years, and finally became a student.
Finally became a student. That's good. So you played football. What position?
I was a wide receiver.
Oh, wow.
Decent hands, but a little too slow.
Yeah, I can relate. So any other clubs that you belonged to growing up or hobbies that you had?
I was like a lot of kids. It was the only thing that mattered to me was football, baseball, basketball. Did that, even through college. And in college, got involved with accounting fraternity, and that's what got me into accounting and eventually got me into a CPA firm. But that was between school and some athletics and a couple of organizations, that kept me pretty busy.
Yeah, yeah. So besides the divorce between your parents growing up, did you have any other hardships in life coming up the ladder?
I really didn't. I had other than that we were poor, I had a pretty good life as a kid. But the divorce, it was a big deal in terms of it made us, I guess, it made us pretty poor, and it certainly made me respect a single mother having to raise and take care of 4 kids, and that's kind of what it became. Probably even before high school started.
Interesting. So, what were you like as a student? Were you a straight A guy, B plus, or were you one of the guys that everybody wants to hire?
I was not a straight A. I was an AB kind of guy, but I will say, getting the CPA out of undergraduate, it has been very helpful, not only for future jobs and positions and on boards and committees, but it was a good move that's kind of carried through my career, and it makes my job now even easier too. A lot of attorneys struggle with math and accounting, but that's all just second nature to me.
Yeah, it's got to come in handy. So you where did you go to law school?
I went to Pepperdine, Southern California.
Oh yeah, up in over on the coast, on the side of the hill, and
on the side of the hill.
Yeah, looking out at that ocean every day. I bet that was it's hard to concentrate. So after
I certainly didn't. Go ahead. I was to say, I certainly didn't enjoy that as much as I should have, looking back.
So after you got out of law school, what was your first job? Did you clerk? Or did you get hired?
My first job out of law school, I had clerked for a bankruptcy judge, I think my second or third year, and I went to a corporate bankruptcy and litigation firm as my first job. You know, with the CPA and everything, that got me in the door places, and that's what firms that were interviewing were mostly interested in, something where I could apply that.
Yeah, I bet they were really attracted to you. So how long did that last, working in the bankruptcy sector?
That lasted about a year and a half, and when I came out in 1990-91, it was a bad time in the economy, and people were getting laid off left and right. I got interested in a couple of cases that a friend was doing, were both personal injury cases, and I was sort of moonlighting a little bit while I was doing that personal injury case, and just fell in love with everything about doing personal injury cases.
Wow, so you were moonlighting, and that was your first experience. So then, how did you end up actually making the switch and jumping over into personal injury trial work?
Well, I kind of moonlighted for a while I was working for a business litigation firm when I came up to the state of Oregon, and I just decided that I was going to make the jump and just do that kind of work. And I did open up my own firm and sort of just started off slowly from there, learning as much as I could by going to CLEs and training just about everything I could soak in, whether it was AHA or the various other organizations or our state organization, OTLA. And I sort of developed a bit of an expertise in doing that kind of work.
Interesting. So you came up here from the Bay Area, and then you didn't start off working with another firm. You just opened your own firm, hung out your shingle, and started looking for clients.
Yeah, no, I did. When I came up here, I did work for a business litigation firm for a short time before I actually threw the shingle out.
Oh, okay. So do you remember the first case you tried?
Do I remember the first case I tried? Yeah, I can remember. Well, in Oregon, we have this DA for a day kind of thing, where you get to go in and try a case. It's usually a prostitution case or DUI case. And I can remember that first trial, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I was doing voir dire, and one of the jury panel members didn't agree with this standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, that it had to be 100% sure that that person was guilty, or she was not going to find them guilty. And I said, well, and I had this big long discussion / argument with the juror about, why it shouldn't be 100%. I didn't have enough sense at the time to, well, okay, this is not the juror for our case, and nice and courteously tell her, maybe you can work on the next case. And so finally the judge had enough of me and said, Tom, can we move on to somebody else? And so that's always made me very sensitive in doing a voir dire, that don't argue with the jurors.
Yeah. Voir dire, jury selection, for any of our listeners that may not be familiar with that term. So how'd that case go?
I believe that the defendant was set free.
Ah, interesting. So
after that voir dire.
Yeah. So in this podcast, Settlement Pros, I'm interviewing settlement pro attorneys in an effort to make the public aware of who the real settlement pros are out there. And in my opinion, after my 30-some years experience in this, and having been involved in over 1,400 cases and over 380 some mediations to date, I've seen a lot of good, a few bad. But one thing I've noticed is that the really good and effective attorneys are what we call trial dogs. These are attorneys that are not afraid of the courtroom. In fact, they look forward to it. And as I said in my introduction, many of you guys and gals that love to try cases, it makes your day, a la Clint Eastwood, when a defendant will not offer any money at all and force you into the courtroom where you can tell the story of what happened to your injured client and the circumstances that led to the defendants causing their tremendous injuries. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Just to add, if you're not having fun doing a trial, you shouldn't be doing it, because you got. For me, I have to enjoy what I'm doing, and I do enjoy being in trial.
So since '92, you've had about 18 years doing this, roughly. I know it's harder and harder to get into.
I wish.
What's that?
I wish, Jack. It's closer to 28 years, 29.
I got to add.
We left out.
Had an accountant on the line. So yeah, add math, 28. So in that 28 years period of time, have you kept track how many cases that you've actually been able to try? I know it's getting harder and harder to get cases into the courtroom.
Oh yeah, and to get into a lot of those National Board of Trial Advocacy, to get into those organizations, you do have to track a lot of your past cases in order to meet the membership requirements. And so, yeah, early on, I have kept track of virtually all of the trials that we've been engaged in.
Interesting. So, in my experience, nobody wins them all, and definitely when the defendants know that the trial attorney that I'm working for is not afraid of the courtroom and is not afraid to lose, that makes them even more dangerous and a better adversary, and someone that's respected by the defense. So in your case, what would you say has been your worst defeat, assuming you've had a defeat, and one that hit deep? Tell us about that.
Well, I think the one was a medical negligence case of a person that was paralyzed because the doctor didn't pick up on stroke symptoms.
Yeah.
I would say early enough, but not at all. And if he had picked up on those things, TIAs, which they're called, early on, he could have done things to help prevent that stroke. But the jury just was not willing to accept that analysis. The jury was a defense verdict, and they found that the doctor hadn't violated any standard of care, that, it would have been nice if he would have picked up on those TIAs, but did not consider that negligence.
Yeah. So those medical cases are tough. I mean, it's tough to get juries to really want to hold doctors accountable. I know in listening to trial attorneys talk about this, it's probably the toughest case in terms of getting a jury to want to hold a doctor or a hospital responsible for their negligence. And especially, I know in small towns, it's especially hard because the juries are afraid that they'll run doctors out, or that they'll end up shutting down their only hospital, and they don't want to do that. So that's it's admirable that trial attorneys take those cases and bring them to juries for consideration in spite of those odds. And I've heard that that the odds on medical malpractice trials are the lowest of any type of case in the country.
Yeah, arguably 80% of them you're going to lose. And right, you hit on all of those points that jurors, even if they think the doctor did something wrong and the doctor was negligent, that they should get a free pass because they're doctors. And in this COVID environment, it may even get worse for people that have been the victims of medical negligence.
Well, in spite of the odds and in spite of the numbers and everything we just talked about, the beautiful thing is that trial attorneys will take on clients with these issues, and they will take their case to settlement or trial and go into the arena and battle it out in spite of the odds. And trial attorneys that take those cases, the med mal cases, medical malpractice, we hold them in high esteem. So thank you for doing that. On the other end of the spectrum, my experience has been that cases involving big trucks, 18-wheelers, they may be, if you had to look at maybe the experience level in terms of juries, they may be a little bit, well, maybe they are all the way on the other end of the continuum. It seems to me, and I'm basing this on my own, my mother and my wife and my daughters and their fear of 18-wheelers, that it would seem like juries would be much, much more agreeable with regard to holding trucking companies responsible for their bad deeds.
No, I think you're right. Unlike medical negligence, where a jury is dealing with very technical things that they're really not familiar with, just about every jury has, like you said, been on the road with an 18-wheeler, and sometimes been on the road where the 18-wheeler didn't act as they should have acted. And so when jurors understand the rules so well, because they live on the highway too, it does make it easier to describe for them what it takes to meet the negligence standard. But the trucking attorneys on the other side, they're all very good, very experienced. And the distinction that a lot of folks don't make is that trucking cases are a lot different than your regular motor vehicle accident. There's various different federal standards that you're dealing with, experts, and you're also strongly examining how the trucking company conducts their business as part of your case. And all of those things, you really should have an experienced trucking attorney if you run into one of those kinds of cases.
Right. I know you've been to a lot of the same conferences that I've attended and spoken at, and I've heard it said over and over that that a trucking company almost cannot have a truck leave the yard on an assignment without breaking 3 or 4 of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act rules. So
that is true.
They're in. But when they make a mistake, the damages are usually enormous. And I know my wife has a fear whenever she sees a triple trailer on the road, scares her to death. And I don't know the data on this. Maybe you do for Oregon. It seems like when we see a trucking accident, it's more likely that it involves a single or a double. I haven't seen too many triples, but do you know what the incidence of accidents on Oregon roads are, or in the Northwest for that matter, or even in the country for triple trailers?
Well, in general, the longer that trailer is, the more dangerous that trailer is. Luckily, some states, Oregon's not one of them, outlaw or have banned triple trailers. So you can't drive with those in those states at all. But that's a strong indication that triples they're dangerous vehicles, and your wife is smart when she sees one to stay away.
Yeah, she wants either she wants me to speed up and get around them as quick as possible, or lay back and stay as far away as possible. So, of course, it doesn't help when I've been involved in so many trucking accident cases across the country myself, working for trial attorneys and injury victims, and you just you can't help but come home and want to tell stories at the dinner table of what happened and how it happened, and then the successes that we have. So I think that's played into some of the fears.
Yeah. Anytime you've got an 80,000 pound vehicle competing with 3,000 and 4,000 pound vehicles, you're gonna have terrible damage.
Yeah, it's a 80,000 pound missile, really, especially when they're doing 70 miles an hour. So, what case has been which case have you had so far that you would say has been the pinnacle case of your career to this point?
That's an easy
talk
one.
about. You don't have to name names if they're confidential, but
the case was just last summer, a case that we handled in Pendleton Federal District Court. We got a very good verdict in that case, and it involved 4 commercial truckers that had been engaging in various acts of road rage for over 100 miles, viewed by numerous different witnesses, and they were just angry at one another and were doing things, illegal passes. On some of the passes, they would not let the other commercial truck get by, and they would hold them out in the passing lane, not letting them get back in. And after that had gone on for about 100 miles, my clients were coming in the other direction on a small country road, and as they were coming around the bend, one of these commercial truck drivers in a mobile home forced the other passing semi-truck out into that lane, out into the passing lane, and wouldn't let him back in. And so when my client unfortunately came around the turn, she had a huge mobile home and semi-truck taking up both of the lanes coming right at her. And she was able to veer to the right, but unfortunately the semi-truck that was passing veered to the left, and head-on collision killed a 30-year-old woman that was driving and seriously injured her husband that was in the passenger seat.
Wow. So, a case like that sounds serious enough with those facts. It's kind of hard to believe that you had to try it. I mean, how did it end up that these defendants didn't want to settle something that egregious?
Good question. The commercial truck driver or commercial driver in the lane, the one that would not allow the other to pass, and then the one that was passing got into the crash. This fella kept on going after the crash, and the police were so angry at this guy that was making this illegal pass, they completely focused on him, and the guy that wouldn't allow him to pass, he left the scene and was 30 miles down the road until somebody caught up with him and said, hey, this guy helped cause this crash too. But the police, as busy as they are, they just focused on the guy that was making the pass and not the one that kept him out there, and only cited the guy making the pass, and that fellow ended up in jail for this. But they sort of let this guy off the hook And when we began our investigation and started learning exactly what happened, which was not in the police reports anywhere, we came to the conclusion, hey, this guy's got some fault here too. But the insurance company they just went straight by the police report and just figured that they could force all the liability onto this passing driver. And they were very arrogant about it, and the driver was very arrogant throughout his depositions and even in trial. And the jury just got it, that, hey, this guy was probably more responsible for this than the other folks, and they had settled out early. But it just goes to show, you got to really investigate these cases. You can't just rely on police reports, because they're just making decisions on the fly, sometimes in the middle of the night. You got to fully investigate to find out what happened. And here, the insurance company only had $1 million policy, but when they refuse to tender the limits in our state, it becomes an unlimited policy, and so they were required to pay the full verdict.
Wow. So, yeah, the police report didn't fully document all the liability of the various parties, but you hired, do you have an investigator on staff, or do you have some favorite vendor that you go to on cases like this? And obviously that probably good investigation, right?
Yep, good investigation makes a huge difference, and we have a person that we use for virtually all of our cases, particularly the trucking cases. And he had to interview probably 15 or 20 different folks to find out what happened. And even he felt like this guy that was making the pass was more in the wrong, because it appeared that that driver was more the instigator than the other. But when we started digging into it and really talking to all of the witnesses and eventually deposing all of those witnesses, it became clear to us that that driver that kept the other driver out was very culpable. And I guess luckily the insurance company never figured it out until the jury verdict came in.
Wow. So were there any interesting developments during the trial in the courtroom? Any Perry Mason type moments?
There were a couple with the trucking company execs, the CEO and the owner. I don't know what the strategy was, but they came in taking this position that, the truck driver is an independent contractor, so we don't really have anything to do with training him or knowing what he or she are doing at the time. But it's pretty clear under trucking law throughout the United States that a driver that works for a company, whether you call them an independent contractor or not, they're responsible for training him, making sure that they have the right qualifications, etc. And so I think that made the jury think, boy, this company, not just this driver, is a danger to our community, and we need to do something about it.
Wow. How long was the jury out on that case, Tom?
6 hours.
Well, not a lot of things go through your head when a jury's out. And
yeah.
I mean, some of these juries come back in very short order and others spend overnight. What were you thinking when they were out 6 hours? Do you have any indications? Were they asking questions of the jury?
Well, we felt pretty good about the case. We felt like the evidence really came in well, almost better than we thought it could. There were a few questions that were being asked by the jury, maybe 3 or 4 different questions, and they were all damages questions. So that made us feel very good.
Oh, I bet.
That we were going to get something out of the case. I don't think even in our best days we thought we would get the verdict that we did, but it was certainly, the full amount was justified for what happened in that case, and the impact on our clients.
Yeah, that verdict made national news, I believe, didn't it?
It did.
And that was how much again when that came in?
That it was 26.4 million.
Man, that is incredible for, I mean, our listeners may be spread out across the country, and this case was tried in Pendleton, Oregon, which is Eastern Oregon. It's a very conservative area. I have heard attorneys in some of the cases I've been involved in tell me that they did not want to try a case up there because of what they thought would be the bias of a conservative jury. That's amazing. Did you guys have any thoughts about the jury pool? And I mean, there's a lot of trucks that run through Pendleton on the Interstate 84.
Yeah, and that the judge made it very clear to us at the beginning of the trial that these are their jurors and their jurisdiction are very good jurors. If you think you're going to get a bunch of yokels that don't know things or don't know about trucking, you're wrong. And she was absolutely right. This was a very smart, conscientious jury. And I am a firm believer that I want a conservative jury when I see real egregious conduct. I think conservative juries may be willing to award more when they see really bad conduct.
Interesting. That's different.
Yeah.
You and I both know attorneys that, for instance, they love trying cases within the city of Portland because, as it's euphemistically called, the People's Republic of Portland, very, very liberal and progressive. And for our listeners, if any of you have ever heard or seen the TV program Portlandia, it's all true. I'm sure Tom can agree with me on that. The hard part for us in watching that program is it's not quite as funny because we know it's about us and we know it's about the place we live and the people that live here with us. And we've worried that it might paint a picture of Portlanders that we didn't want spread out across the country. But boy, it sure hasn't stopped people from moving here, that's for sure. Portland has become the flavor du jour, especially for the younger crowd and the kids that want to live where there's good food, good coffee, good beer and wine, and lots of recreational activities. That's Portland and Oregon, for that matter.
That is Portland. That is Portland. But if I've got very bad conduct by a defendant and a good judge, I'll take a conservative jury anytime.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting attitude. So is this the case that you were nominated by, you and co-counsel by Public Justice for consideration as Trial Lawyer of the Year?
No, that was a different case. That it was a gun case that we did a couple years back that settled last year. And we did that case with the Brady Law Center Against Gun Violence and the Cohen Milstein firm. We all teamed up. It was a woman from California had come up to Oregon and was doing some sightseeing up here. And a very crazy person got a hold of some guns that they never should have had through a pawn shop. And while this woman was traveling through, going to see her sons at the one of her sons at the University of Oregon, this person shot her numerous times and then started her on fire and left her there to die.
Terrible.
Yeah, and so it was a horrible case, and we traced back where the guns had come from, and it was from a pawn shop that never should have issued the guns, and also from an internet company that was putting out these guns without following just the standard federal regulations that are required for issuing guns. And so that was who the claim was against.
So they broke the rules.
They broke the rules, and we were in a very conservative county, and we're worried about that because, you know, we didn't want to be seen as attacking gun manufacturers or gun sellers, but it was basically, hey, gun sellers, just follow the rules and make sure you don't give guns to somebody that's been diagnosed with a mental problem.
Yeah. Well, that should go without saying.
Yeah.
No matter what side I think people come down on with regard to the Second Amendment and the issue of guns, I think we can all agree that they shouldn't be sold to people with mental issues. And I have a brother-in-law that works for a pawn shop, and he got laid off a couple of weeks ago for 2 weeks, ostensibly for the reason that the pawn shop had 2 straight weeks of record sales from the start of the virus issue or COVID-19 issue. They'd had 2 straight weeks of record sales, people lining up to buy guns and ammo. And he said, we ran out. Even, he said, we had guns that we'd had for 10 years that were so crappy, nobody wanted to buy them. And we sold those, and we sold all the ammo. And then the owner decided, we're going to take 2 weeks off. And he told everybody, you're off for 2 weeks, shut it down. So crazy time. But even he has said they're very careful about who they sell these to, the background checks they're required to do, et cetera. And that the owner of his company is constantly harping on not selling, just completely refusing to sell to somebody that is obviously not in their right mind. And
yeah,
so we can all agree on that. So let's talk about you a little bit more. Like talk about your value system. You've had an interesting upbringing. You grew up kind of in a remote area out. Well, would you call it country, or it must have been the mountains? Did you growing up? Did you fish and hunt when you got to Southern Nevada?
You know, I was never a big fisherman or hunter. I still haven't figured out, you know, the allure of fishing, I hate to say, for you fishermen out there. And I never have been a hunter either. That was not something I did. Again, all I cared about was sports related things, the football, baseball, and basketball, and trying to get through school.
So were sports your religion growing up, or did you have any religious training when you were young?
Well, it was kind of my religion, but I did grow up in a Catholic grammar school, and even the first year of high school before I moved out of Florida. But I certainly would not consider myself a religious person, even though my kids also went to Catholic school. I like to think I have a very high moral character and value integrity and things of that nature. So I do have a certain moral code that I like to abide by and have an expectation in other people that's not always met, but that's kind of the way I don't know, that's kind of the way I think and kind of the way I deal with people.
So where did that come from, do you think?
It came from my mom.
Came from your mom?
No question. Yeah, no question. That's where it came from.
And how did she instill that in you?
Oh,
you have a favorite saying or two, or do you remember any incident in particular where she got you to straighten up and fly straight and level?
Well, I think the one thing I remember, and I think it scared her more than anything, and that's why she was so angry, is a friend and I kind of just took off for a day that turned into a day and then into the night, where we kind of just didn't let anybody know where we were. And that taught me that don't ever do that again, and that you have to have enough respect for people that care for you to keep them informed. So she was not very happy with me for a couple of days after that.
Interesting. So that incident led to maybe some introspection and self-reflection about right behavior?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
It did, and that it's not all about you.
Well, isn't that the truth? So what have you been able to, what are you most proud of in terms of what you've instilled in your own kids? And how many kids do you have, Tom?
I have 3 kids, all adult kids now, all of them out of college. Well, yes, my daughter, out of undergrad, let's put it that way. My daughter just started law school last year.
Oh, wow.
And I've got a son that's going to start next year. She's at the University of Chicago, although with the COVID thing, she's back home now. They're on the computer doing the remote thing for their last semester this term. And my son will start next year. We're not sure where.
Wow. And he's going to law school too?
Yes.
Wow, both kids. That's amazing.
Yeah. Some of my attorney friends, they counsel their kids against it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do something else. But
well, if you tell a kid not to do something, it's for certain they're going to do it. So I don't know if that worked for you, but it's a testament that you got 2 kids that both want to follow you in the profession. I think I scared my daughters off with all of these stories of injuries and tales of woe, even though in my experience, in my practice, I've been blessed to be able to get into these cases at a stage where settlement is generally imminent. And by that, I mean usually within a year or a verdict. And we've been fortunate to be the ones involved to help clients of yours and others try to make these situations as good as they can possibly be going forward in a financial sense. And I'm a little surprised that neither one of my daughters wanted to come in, but that's all right. They've got their individual lives, and actually my oldest daughter is working for us. It's just that she's a writer, so she does a lot of the writing on some of the technical stuff in some of our articles, and also on our websites. So we've got her involved. And recently, due to the COVID crisis, my younger one has found herself without her volleyball club or her day job. So she's volunteered that she wouldn't mind coming in and working for the company for a while. So who knows? Maybe they'll get involved. But that is really neat that both of your kids are going to be lawyers. So, one of the things I've heard from lawyers over the years whose kids have gone into law school and gone into the practice is that they never hired their kids out of law school. They generally, is there an unspoken kind of a deal between you lawyers where, maybe you nudge somebody, or somebody just knows that your kids are coming out of law school and they offer them their first job, and maybe they learn how to work and they get their tail chewed at some other law firm before they come back to the DMOR law group in Portland, Oregon. Is that what you're thinking?
Yep, that's exactly. A couple colleagues we know, Chuck and Jane Paulson, Chuck the father, and Jane. Yeah. That's kind of what she did. So we got to send them off to some other firm to learn things and have people tell them what to do, and then maybe come back to our firm later on. And I think I'm going to follow that model. Yeah,
I've heard that that's been very, very successful for a lot of attorneys. And I remember when I heard that that Chuck had a daughter that was in law, and she was actually working for a defense firm.
That's
And,
right.
that's how she got her chops. Jane's great. So, what 3 books did you recommend to your kids that they read growing up? Anything, I'm going off on a tangent here, but what 3 books have made the most impression in your life? And did you pass any of those on to your kids?
David Ball on Damages, Rules of the Road, Rick Friedman, and Don't Eat the Bruises. No. That's a tough question. You should have gave me preparation for that one.
I know.
3 books that I had my kids read. One of the books by Michael Jordan, I think all of them have read that. I can't even remember what it is. Good ESPN special on right now too. Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah. All-time classic.
Yeah. And what other books can I think of? 1L.
1L?
You can tell where my mind is. Yeah, it's for first year, the book written by a first-year lawyer who became a very good author after that book too.
Yeah.
But getting these kids to read books these days ain't easy.
No, it isn't.
They'll read Reddit and everything else online, but trying to get them to read a book's tough.
Yeah, I agree. Growing up, I remember raiding the family library, and one of the first books, and I've still not figured out whether it was my dad's book or my mom's book, but I came across a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by a doctor named Maxwell Maltz. And it was my first exposure to essentially thinking, visualizing, and how thoughts and pictures that we hold in our brain can help change your reality. And made a big impression on me and led me into other books of that sort. I remember I also found Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People in the family library, and I think Think and Grow Rich,
Right.
another one. So nothing on the law, but more on success and that sort of thing. So, and it wasn't that my folks asked me to read those; they just had them available, and I was looking for things to read and grabbed them. So,
They worked well for you.
yeah, I had a really fun time reading Michener's book about the astronauts that went to the moon. And I grew up in a family where my dad worked for the government in the Navy in San Diego, where we were stationed when I was just a little guy. He was stationed at Miramar Naval Base, and he did not have a college education, and so they wouldn't let him be a pilot, but they made him into an air traffic controller. And Miramar is, for people who are into aviation, is kind of famous because for the longest time it became the site of the Top Gun school. So my dad was there in the late 50s before it became Top Gun, but we grew up with stories of aviation. After he got out of the Navy, then the Federal Aviation Administration called him and offered him a job if he could pass the test, and he did. And we spent a short period of time. I went to kindergarten here in Portland, and then when the FAA hired my dad, they after he got done with his training school at the University of Oklahoma, they sent us to Fremont, California in the Bay Area. So I went first through about half of the 8th grade in Fremont. And then we moved back to Portland in '68 when Haight-Ashbury was in full bloom. Berkeley was in flames. I think the Zodiac Killer may have surfaced or had begun to surface. We had Hell's Angels riding through town, our town. I mean, it was just a crazy time in Northern California, and it was really interesting to come to Portland and go to high school out in Southeast. Completely different. I'd say it's a lot like going maybe from Southern Florida to up in the hills in South Nevada. It was a culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I came in,
Yeah.
I don't know about your experience, but the first day of school up here was October 20th, I think, of 1968. And I showed up at a country school way out in Pleasant Valley in Southeast Portland. And I had on white Levi's and a striped shirt, horizontal stripes that we called surfer shirts back in California. And I walked into school, met the principal. They took me down to my classroom, and there were kids in there with bib overalls. And boy, did they ever look at me. I mean, I stuck out like a sore thumb. So, yeah, quite the culture shock. But it was really a good move, and I'm glad my parents did it.
Yeah, that stuff that you just talked about, going from one part of the world to the other part of the world, from Florida to some country town, or some parts of Southeast Portland. You don't enjoy it when you first have to do it, but there's something to be said for that as a young kid having to adjust. I think it's a good thing. It can be a good thing.
Yes. Yeah, I remember when my dad came home and at the dinner table told us that, well, the news was on, and the news in the Bay Area that night was especially horrific. It was nonstop craziness, and literally the students up at Berkeley had lit one of the buildings on fire. I mean, it was just nuts. And he said, kids, a job has come open at the Portland airport, and I'm told that if I will put in a bid, I'm going to get it. And I'm putting in the bid tomorrow. And if I get it, that means we're going to be moving in 2 weeks. Start saying your goodbyes and start packing your stuff.
Wow.
2 weeks later, we were heading up the road, and I remember I was crestfallen. I thought I played football, basketball, and baseball, and I loved football. And I'd made the team at Centerville Junior High as a wide receiver, by the way, Tom. But I really liked baseball, and I could not believe that we were moving to rainy Oregon, and how was I going to play baseball in the rain? But,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know about you, but I look back on all those things that have happened, good and bad, or that I thought were bad. Some were bad, but, it's all led. My philosophy is it's all led to where I'm at today, and where I'm at today is a really, really good place. And but for all of those things that happened in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. So I met your wife, the Pistol, Lisa.
The Pistol, yes.
Yeah, I'm married to a Pistol too. How'd you meet Lisa?
I met Lisa at Arthur Anderson and Company in San Francisco, the CPA firm that I went to right after undergrad.
Wow.
I met her there. I heard all these good things about her from other people before I ever met her. So when I first met her, it was like, boy, I have to chase this one down. And she was a Pistol then, too.
Yeah. The thing about being married to Pistols, and this is my opinion, they bring out the best in you. And I really wonder in my case if I would have been as heavily motivated to pursue my own business and my own success outside of the investment advisory firm that I left in 1985 to do this. Not because she was prodding me, but it's with a pistol, it's more of the opposite. It's kind of like you encounter resistance and they tell you, yeah, you can't do that. And you just, in my case, in a loving way, I wanted to prove, yeah, I can, and I will do this, and I will succeed. I'll show you, and you will like me more for it. So I don't know if that's been your experience, but I know it's been a major motivator for me, and I'm glad for it.
Very similar. We're going to have to, define this pistol term since we're using it so loosely. But yeah, very similar. There's no question in my mind. I would not be half the place I am today without my wife. Would not have been what little success we've had. I attribute a lot of that to her. And when I was starting a law firm and struggling like new lawyers do just to survive, she was working a full-time job and taking care of kids. So she did it all, and I attribute a lot to her.
Boy, similar experience. And to define pistol, I think a lot of people know what that term means, but it can also be, we could also define them as Spitfires. They're the kind of gals that they're not naive. Let's put it that way. And
Yeah.
they love to call you out on your stuff.
Yeah, they have opinions.
Boy, do they. Boy, do they. So, but it's been a blessing, and it was the right move for me. I know that. And I can still remember I stayed single for a long time. All my friends were married and were having kids, and I really thought I was going to be a bachelor. And I remember my dad saying to me one day, he called me Jackson. He said, "Jackson, I got to tell you something. You're just the kind of guy, you're not going to be as successful as you can be until you get married. You need that kind of pressure. You need that kind of motivation. Not that you're lazy, but that's what you're going to need. That's what's going to really bring it out of you." And boy, was he right. It sure did it, because there's nothing like having a wife and a brand new baby to instill in your head that failure is not an option.
That's right.
You can't
Absolutely.
fail them. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up here, but before we go, because you're not afraid to step into the arena, Tom Diamore, or the courtroom for your client, which is really the arena that we're talking about, I'm going to ask you to step into the arena for three maybe tough questions.
Okay.
But maybe they won't be. But here they are. First one, what are you most appreciative of in your life right now at this moment?
It would be family and the person we just talked about, my wife, I guess it's 32, 33 years, and my three great children, not to mention all of the other relatives, but in a very good place with our family, and we always have been.
Oh, that's great. So here's question number 2. Which of your core values or principles, or maybe one of your causes, do you feel strongly enough that you would literally stand up and fight for if required?
Well,
How it presented itself.
I think it falls into what we do. The ability to represent people that have been wronged, whether it's by sexual abuse, personal injury, or their family members have been killed, to be able to step up for those people and represent them and try to, make some right of a wrong. And I tell my clients, there's no way we're ever going to get back what you've lost, whether physically, mentally, or a family member. But I think that's something that I would fight for, and we do fight for as trial lawyers in our legislatures and in Congress and the organizations that we're members of, such as American Association for Justice, the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association, that spends most of our time representing and trying to preserve legislation and create legislation that protects folks from injury by negligent folks and intentional folks that are out to harm folks. So
Right.
I think I've found the perfect profession for me. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. I love other trial lawyers. I love the organizations that I'm a member of, and the interaction that we have and the help that we have that you can get from your fellow trial lawyers. So I think that's what drives me, and I'm glad I'm in the profession that I'm in.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I didn't ask you this before I go to the third question. I didn't ask you this earlier, but you represent plaintiffs in sexual abuse cases, and you were raised in the Catholic Church, and of course, the Catholic Church is in the headlines again with regard to more and more sexual abuse cases. Has that been a problem? Have you handled cases against the church, and has that been an issue for you?
Yes, I have, and it never has been an issue for me. I think it motivated me more that there is something very wrong going on with the Catholic Church to the highest levels, and regardless of being a Catholic or not, I always felt the compunction to root out that what I called that evil that was present and unfortunately had consumed a lot of the Catholic Church. And I think the thing that stands out for me the most is the fact that these institutions, and it's not just the Catholic Church, but these institutions, how they feel like their only option is to cover up this horrible wrongdoing, this criminal activity. And you see it every day, from hospitals to employers. The first instinct seems to be to cover things up, and somehow we've got to get around that so that covering things up aren't the first compunction. But I do think the Catholic Church hopefully will come around. They still have a long way to go, but just the mentality of what they allowed to go on and what they need to try and prevent in the future.
Right. Well, in my career, we've certainly had a lot of Catholic sex abuse cases, but we've had them from nearly every religious faith, and of course from the Boy Scouts of America, which early in my career I got involved when I had a downtown Portland office. I got involved raising money for the Boy Scouts, and I remember I would call on trial attorneys and solicit donations. And I remember the day that one of them said to me, "Hey, Jack, I'm not giving money to that organization. Do you know what's going on in there with regard to sexual abuse?" And I had no idea. And I went back to the people that were in charge of me in the fundraising and told them what I'd encountered. They denied it. But I asked them to go up the ladder to confirm it or deny it. And when the individual came back, he confirmed it in a roundabout way, but tried to minimize it. And that was the end of my fundraising with the Boy Scouts. I told them I could no longer be involved. I knew I couldn't go to trial attorneys if there was going to be litigation, and that's what I was told, that litigation was coming. I knew I wasn't going to be able to raise money by asking trial lawyers for it. But interestingly enough, the first sexual abuse case I got involved in came out of the denomination that I was raised in. And it was with an attorney in our state that's nationally renowned and is a basketball fanatic and quite the wild man. So you probably know who I'm talking about. Initials are BB. And that's Bill Barton. And he probably won't mind me telling the story, but I get this phone call, and he's got a case, and it's against the Assemblies of God church down in a city south of us here. And it was against one of their youth leaders that was involved in their equivalent of the Boy Scout program. It was called the Royal Rangers. And when we were in California, I mean, we went to an Assemblies of God Pentecostal church, and they had just started their version of the Boy Scouts called the Royal Rangers. It was across the entire denomination. And here it's the very first sexual abuse case that I got involved in, and that was an interesting story at the dinner table, and especially when my parents came for dinner the next time. So
yeah, I can imagine.
But it's unfortunately we've got a big problem across all of those organizations, and churches attract people who are having problems and issues a lot of times. Sometimes they're families that have gone through divorce and the kids are struggling, and mom or dad thinks, hey, if I get them into church, that'll help straighten things out. And unfortunately, whether it's the Boy Scouts or the Catholic Church or the Assemblies of God or the Mormon Church, it doesn't matter. We've seen cases in all of them, but they've attracted those type of abusers who are looking for the opportunities to take advantage of kids who are vulnerable in one way or another. So kudos for taking those cases on, and let's hope that we get that straightened out.
Yeah, the bottom line is, these sexual predators, they are going to prey on the most vulnerable, and with these churches, and like you said, it's various churches, but when these sexual predators prey on the most vulnerable and do it in the name of God, there's really nothing more despicable than that.
Yeah, it's the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
All right, so last question. If your career was to be condensed into one sentence, Tom Diamore, when it's all over, what would that one sentence say about you?
He represented the less fortunate against the man.
That's great. He represented the less fortunate against the man. Well,
yeah.
That really sums up trial lawyers, and I tell people this all the time. You guys and gals that do this kind of work, many of you are lone wolves, or you're in small practices with just a few partners and associates, and you're going up against law firms with seemingly unlimited resources and the ability to, if you let them and they get away with it, to grind your clients into dust. So it's Don Quixote-ish in some respects, but in the other respects, you guys are champions, and I've heard that said, champions for justice. You're rigid. You are not afraid to go in the arena and put it all on the line, even lose, and that's what makes you so dangerous. So, Tom Diamore, you are a settlement pro, and congrats on making it through the podcast. So,
well, Jack, let me just say to you, thank you for what you do, because when we're lucky enough to get a recovery for our clients, it's so vitally important that is protected for them, sometimes for the remainder of their lifetime. And it sure is a comfort to me that I'm able to turn clients over to you after we've been successful to take care of them and make sure they make the right financial decisions in their future. So thank you too.
Well, thank you. It's been our pleasure. So for you listeners, if you want to get a hold of Tom, we will have all of his contact info and all of his social media links when we post the podcast. And if you're looking for him online, it's www.Diamore Law, and that's D-A-M as in Mike, ORELAW.com, Diamore Law. Tom, thanks again. It's been great. Thanks for being the very, very first. And we'll look forward to reading about more of your exploits in the paper, I am sure. Thank you, my man.
All right. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. Stay safe.
Okay, that's a wrap on today's podcast, and a big thanks to Tom Diamore, Portland, Oregon, for taking the time and sharing his story with us. Now, everybody else, you can subscribe to the Settle Pros podcast on Spotify and iTunes for more conversations just like this one. This has been Jack Meligan, and I'll be back with another interview of a Settle Pro very shortly. See you next time.